Hello. This is a different kind of episode today. Welcome to the book club with the Cloud Security Podcast. This is the first of its kind, and I have had a bad habit of not reading enough books, or at least trying to build one habit. So when my friend AJ reached out and said I should start a book club, I'm like, I think I should start a book club. So I usually have music and stuff going on, but this is because it's with friends, and we have a great author who actually Amazon #1 bestseller currently for the book as well. So I'll rephrase the exact title, what that means for when he comes on stage. But for the moment, let me introduce you to the crew of friends that I have. AJ, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Ashish. Always good to chat with you. I enjoy being here, so appreciate being on.
I appreciate that as well. I love your AWS certified T-shirt. As ByteCheck is making things suck less, I guess. That's pretty awesome. Let me bring the rest of the crew as well. Mr. Nick, welcome. Going well. EITR. I was hoping you had like the post-it notes. You know how much I love you, man. I love your comedy. There you go. AJ is like has got the merchandise happening. And Nick is gonna throw some post-it notes at this. Like, there you go, man. It's like that's my merchandise. So I want to start off by saying thank you for introducing me to this idea of book club. So appreciate that. And while we're at it, I should bring the author as well, who's the man of the hour today. Ted, welcome to the show, Ted.
All right. Hey, psyched to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I hope I got the name of the book right. And the reason I am asking this is because I wanted to play the part of someone who hasn't read your book. So I intentionally did not read your book, and I made sure that I have questions for people who may not have heard of your book as well, so I can bring that perspective. Whereas AJ and Nick are the ones who have read your book and bookmarked it. So I'm looking forward to their questions as well as to how that goes. And to start off with, for people who don't know you, I know my audience already knows AJ and Nick, but I would love for you guys to do a bit of an introduction, and then we go to Nick, Ted for introduction, and we'll get into our questions. What do you guys think? Should we just go around? AJ, you want to go first, man?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm AJ Yan. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ByteCheck. Been in cybersecurity for a little over a decade, half of that time in the U.S. Army, and then went to do some consulting work where I was focused on cloud security and helping people achieve some of their compliance goals, and just realized that compliance sucks. So set out last year in the middle of the pandemic to launch ByteCheck to make compliance suck less. So happy to be here. Happy to talk about Hackable. It's a book that really helped reshape the way I think about penetration tests and vulnerability assessments, especially from a compliance perspective. And think it's a must read for anybody in information security, regardless if you're in application security or not. It's the concepts there apply. So I'm excited about this conversation.
That's awesome. Thank you for that brief intro to the Hackable as well. Nick, over to you, man.
Happy to be here. Nicholas Hughes. You can call me Nick since we're doing a book review with friends. And I'm the CEO of EITR Technologies. We're a services company. We do cloud consulting. So really where the cloud automation and cybersecurity come together. So that's kind of how I know you guys, right? Security. And really excited to be here today. It's I kind of got a reputation for the LinkedIn goofball. So I think I was messing around in the comments section saying, hey, we should start a book club. And AJ jumped right on it. He was like, yeah, man, let's do this thing. And here we are.
The funny thing I just realized, AJ is making compliance suck less. You're doing automation, so you need automation to make compliance suck less. So it's kind of like, this is for Ted, no pressure. What's a trifecta to make this work really well?
Well, I make the security part of it suck less. So.
Oh, there you go. Awesome. A brief intro about yourself as well. Always an author, first-time author. Like, what's your story, man?
Yeah. So this is my first book. I guess my day job, where I acquired all the knowledge and insights that went into this book, are I'm a leader of ethical hackers, and our company is called ISE, Independent Security Evaluators. And basically companies come to us to help them find their security vulnerabilities and help fix them. And what led me to want to write this book was all of the different just kind of crazy experiences that I've had working for, some of the largest tech companies in the world and helping them solve their challenges and seeing how a lot of their challenges, even the largest companies in the world, are the same as for your startup. And I knew how to solve those. So I wanted to write a book to help people solve them.
It's pretty awesome. And out of curiosity, I'm gonna kick things off, but there is a slight tradition. I don't know if you guys have a cup. Oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. Thank you so much for this. I appreciate that. The first question that I had is like, man, I'm like shit scared of writing books. I first of all, hats off to you for writing a book. What made you write a book? Like, was that something that you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of always felt like I had a book in me. I'm the kind of person who is really inspired by doing hard things. Like, I choose on my own time to go train for and run a marathon. Like, who does that? Like, my wife said to me at one point when I'm training for the marathon, she's like, you don't have to do that, right? Like, there's no requiring.
Right. I think exactly like your wife, right? Like, why am I running? I have a car, right? I do still have a car. Pretty sure I run that far.
Yeah, and I think writing a book is similar in that it's like it's this really hard thing to do, and it requires setting a long-term goal and being persistent in pursuit of that goal over a long period of time. And just like running a marathon, you're not going to actually successfully do it unless you're drawn by some larger reason. And for me, it wasn't just about that writing a book is hard, though I did find that itself very motivating. It was because there was really two things that I noticed. The first thing was I felt like I kept having the same conversations all the time with our current and our prospective customers. And it was like, wow, this is really interesting. All these different companies and all these different industries approaching problems in all these different ways. They all kind of have these same security challenges. And once I recognized that condition existed, then I started thinking about how do you solve those challenges. And that was really the swift kick in the butt to be like, you have to write this book. It's no longer like, it would be cool to write this. No, you are required to write this book now, because I realized that the conventional solutions to those problems that kind of everybody has were pretty backwards. And that was when I was like, you know what? I can't stand for that, because I mean, think about that, right? You got someone who's trying to change the world in some way through technology. And then they recognize that security is an important part of that. And then they realize they have some security challenges. So then they go out and try to solve the security challenges, and the advice on how to solve those challenges is not the right advice. I'm like, we can't let that exist anymore. And so I sat down. That when I connected those dots, that day is the day I sat down and started outlining the book. And about 17 months later, it was in my hand. That's
awesome. I just reminded me as you were saying this, that the strong emotion you felt, as they say, if you love it so much, you should put a ring on it. What you did is you made it written so that like there's like this is my proof. Right? How is this in writing? Like, yep, I have a whole book printed on this. Do you want to it's like you've permanently made your opinion stick, and it's pretty amazing, right? Because I feel a lot of us would obviously say things online. It kind of goes away after a few, whatever the algorithm does with it. But a book kind of has a whole different set of audience as well, who've always appreciated I guess the insight into the tiny part of your brain. 17 months of patience as well is a long time, man. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep that time. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say that the thing that really resonated with me when you were just talking, Ted, was the why of, hey, I keep having the same conversation over and over again. And the underlying theme for the book for me as I'm going through it was that like you're systematically making the case for why you do this throughout the entire book, right? That was the theme for me, just basically saying chapter after chapter, like, look, here's why you're doing this over and over and over again. And I think that that's like the best thing that you could have targeted, right? Because not only are you having that conversation other people in the field are too, right? You know, other people that do completely different things, like AJ, the compliance, and me with automation, right? Like we're constantly having to make the case for why this is a beneficial exercise. And you know, that's just what triggered in me the entire time was like, hey, you know, you're laying out the benefits or the costs of not doing these different things.
Yeah, and
it's incredibly powerful, right? Why, as humans, we all want to know why, but
yeah. I know. I was gonna say because I think worthwhile calling out. We didn't mention this in the beginning, but it is the Amazon #1 bestseller. Is that the right? Is that the right way to put it?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That is like. I mean, I don't know of many cybersecurity books that have passed that. I mean, this is how new I am to the book place. Is there any other cybersecurity book that has passed this? Like become a #1 Amazon seller? Not that I'm asking you to lay out your competition, but
well, I actually don't see other authors as competition. I think we're all contributing to the same mission, which is to share knowledge and drive things to be better. So, I'm not an encyclopedia of everyone who's gone #1 or not, but it was really interesting when I was looking at, I have these screenshots now of when it hit #1. And it hit #1 in a bunch of different categories, 9 different categories actually. And it was really interesting looking at those different ones because the books that it was ranking ahead of are books that are like incredible security books. And I'm looking at, things like Kevin Mitnick's Ghost in the Wire, Andy Greenberg's Sandworm, and Sandstorm. I'm like thinking of techno right now. Sandworm. And I'm looking at those. I'm like, man, those are really important books that have, made differences and continue to make differences to a lot of people. I'm like, wow, it's just amazing that like we're all driving towards the same thing. And it's just cool to see. But I don't know who else has necessarily gone #1, but I couldn't name any off the top of my head.
No, but that's pretty good to know as well, because I think that kind of gives us a range for what this book has been able to achieve. Because how long has the book been out for?
Well, by this point, about like 5 months it's been out.
Wow, 5 months and already Amazon #1. That's pretty awesome, man. Congratulations to you as well. 17 months of I can't imagine pure agony of, is this worth writing this down? Because you can't change it after it's written down, I guess. Can you make a version 2, I guess?
I could, but I don't think you go in with the intent to revise it later. Although I am doing the audiobooks getting recorded right now, and I'm reviewing all the audio files, and it's kind of funny listening to it because, I think all 4 of us, I shouldn't speak for you 3, but I'm interpreting from what I understand about you guys that, we're all the kind of people who are constantly trying to improve and get better and everything. And so you write something and then, a few months later, you're like, I've improved the idea now. It's like I'm hearing the audio files. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do it. Here's how I would say it differently. So maybe there's another book. I don't know. We'll see.
So maybe let's go a bit deeper then. So why this title? And as a reader who hasn't read the book yet, what am I expecting? What's your message to the that you want to convey through the book?
Well, the simplest reason why I chose the title Hackable was that one of the things that I do in the book, I mentioned before why I had to write the book. And it's because I hear all these, misconceptions about how to approach security. And one of the most prolific misconceptions, and you even hear security companies talk about this kind of rubbish, where they're like, unhackable this and unhackable that. And I'm like, no. What's the opposite of unhackable?
Yep.
And that's ultimately how I arrived at the title. And then of course it has the benefit that it's really memorable, it's short, it's easy to spell, it's easy to say. It clearly is about information security. So it was a no-brainer once I arrived at it.
Yeah, the title I think is what drew me towards it too, just because it's a mindset that I think most good security professionals have. Is it's not a matter of if I'll be breached, it's a matter of when. And if you're in security, you know that, and you think about that constantly, and you're not saying that there's no way that no matter what you do, every system can be hacked, and like that. The title of it, I was like, okay, this is going to be a real book. Like we're going to actually hear some stuff that's real, not someone saying that if you do all these magical things, you're going to be perfect.
Yeah, I think
it's kind of funny too when you search on Amazon for just Hackable. I have a screenshot of this too because I'm like, this is why I had to write this book. There's no other books called Hackable. Obviously, that was part of my research. Like, let's just make sure I'm not titling this after someone else.
Yeah, of course.
But there is a book that's called Unhack. It's like, it's not just called Unhackable, but it's like the something unhackable, whatever. And I'm like,
interesting.
That book, the fact that book exists is why my book needs to exist.
Oh, no way. Someone. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there you go. I think that's very differentiate between a practitioner who's probably had some real life experience versus, I'm gonna write a book so it'll be catchy.
Probably.
Yeah. Or people like us who pick on it and hate it, I guess, later on. that'll be the other one. I'm curious to know from AJ, you and Nick as well, like, because you've obviously read the book, and I'm listening into this as a non-reader of the book. Thoughts on the book from you, AJ? Like, what was your, I guess, feeling when you picked up the book, and when did you finish it? Just like finished in one sitting, I imagine. You went on mute.
There we go. You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
It was a quick read because when I started it, I was like, oh shit, there's something here. This is really cool. And I started to like kind of get like a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I'm like, wait a second, like I've done a lot of compliance assessments, and I think every single one of them includes a penetration test control. And we did not think about these things. We just kind of accepted whatever was given to us. And I was like, that's wrong. Like I was telling Ted when we first talked about it, I was like, I immediately wanted to like run out to my customers and be like, hey, like, we're changing your pen test control. We're not saying that anymore. We're saying vulnerability assessments, and here's why, and here's what you got to do. So I read through it pretty quickly, and then I actually loved it so much I wrote a few hundred words on it. And for CISO Mag, I'll find the link and drop it here to you, Ashish, so you can add it to notes and stuff. But it for me, the what kind of addicted to me as I was reading it, because I work in compliance, was that this is something that every single company that goes through a compliance assessment, that this is a requirement that they have to meet. And they're going about it to check the box, and they're not getting the value that Ted outlines in Hackable from doing it the right way. And actually being able to find vulnerabilities, fix them, and then know that like things are going to break again. Like there's a section in the book, or some area in the book, Ted talks about like 0 days. Like 0 days exist. Like everybody knows, like real compliance is this, like it's up and down. It's not a straight line, but you get all these compliance reports and it's just a straight line. It's like, yeah, everything was great for 12 months. It's not how reality works. And that's pen test once a year. They're not going to cut it. And just a typical pen test as well. I think for me, it was just eye opening to see like, all right, this is a problem in compliance. And I want to go tell people that you need to reevaluate how you're thinking about these things, because people are spending thousands of dollars on these assessments. They're wasting a bunch of time, and you should get value out of all of them, whether that's your vulnerability assessments, your compliance assessments, whatever it is you're spending money on, like you should get value. So it was a quick read for me, Ashish. And then I went out and wrote something about the book. That's how much I enjoyed reading it.
Wow. So you're calling them as vulnerability assessments now, not pen testing?
Yeah, we actually, I'm pretty sure I've changed it already, but we've pushed it to prod, but we've changed our control and our platform and everything. We don't do just typical penetration testing anymore. We ask our clients to look into vulnerability assessments and ask them about rescanning and ask them about, what was the scope? Like, talk to me about like how it actually happened, not just handing me this paper that says some random person ran a automated tool against your environment and give you a list of CVEs. Like actually show me what went in the scope. And like, that's the part, like just the different types of tests, think about white box versus black box, and what Ted describes in the book about the differences and why you do them. And he has a great analogy in the book about a castle, and I won't get into it because you got to go read it to find out. But like the why of why you do these different types of tests is so important from a compliance perspective. And he also outlines like when in the company's life cycle they should do different types of tests, which is important because as a startup, you have different types of threats, you have different types of things you should be thinking about than a large corporation with incident response teams and red teams and blue teams and all these other things in place. So it to me, it was just, something that we have to change in compliance. We have to do it differently because the typical pen test control is not meeting the requirements that we're saying that we're meeting. Compliance is about security. I know it's people don't think it is, but it's supposed to be about security. And the control should be mitigating a risk. And just saying that you conducted a penetration test doesn't really mitigate any risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I come from a pretty long operations background, and throughout the entire time that I was mostly doing operations, when people would say, "Oh, we got to do our pen test" or whatever, it's laughable what they're actually doing, right? What they're considering to be a penetration test wasn't even that. And Ted goes over in the book quite a bit about how words matter, and I liked this so much that I bookmarked it. But if you can see, the cat and then not a cat.
Yes.
That's in the section where words matter, and how he's breaking down, like, here's the types of things that I consider to be a vulnerability assessment versus a penetration test versus like vulnerability scanning and things like that. I mean, laying it out like that, like, hey, what you're actually getting should be this. So if somebody's marketing it as this, that's what you should be walking away with. Because there's so many people out there that are just like pencil whipping it, right? Like they're going through their compliance scanning, their compliance assessments, and they have this box to check, and that's what they're treating it as. And what's your goal? What value are actually trying to get out of this?
Yeah.
If it's just check the box, then okay, yeah, sure, go ahead and do that. But good luck when you end up in the news 3 months from now, right?
Yeah.
So if you're actually trying to get better at security, and you're actually trying to provide value not only internally but for your customers as well, which is a huge theme inside of the book, right? Like how you can show that all of these things that you're doing have value at the end of the road, right? Like how you can show your customers that you're doing the right thing, and you can, use that as a selling point almost for your own product or service. Like, hey, we're doing everything right. Here's how.
So yeah,
sorry, trying to go on, AJ.
I just say that was part of my motivation for saying we need to change this in compliance assessments, because if you're one of these companies that are the early folks that are no longer having the generic pen test control in your report, and you're actually talking about vulnerability assessments, you're actually talking about rescans, you're actually talking about the scope in your compliance assessment report, you're going to stand out. It's going to be a differentiator amongst your competitors. And hopefully, people start seeing security as a way to sell, like Nick was saying, because like then we'll get buy-in and won't have to fight, for a couple $100 to do things in security, as most people have to. So like, I think this is a way that you can show security as a differentiator and go out to your competitors and be like, hey, like they did it out of the box. Ask our competitors about their pen tests, and then here's what we did. And let's compare the two, and who do you think's more secure based off of that?
That's awesome. And I love the fact that you guys picked up on two different sides of doing this as well. But I'm curious to know from Ted as well. Now, since you've heard the feedback, this is live review of live feedback review of your book. First thoughts on this?
I mean, that was a pretty fulfilling few moments to hear you guys talk about that, to hear, smart, capable practitioners talking about like being excited about the ideas and stuff, because, writing a book it truly is an act of service. There's undeniably benefits to me as a person as well, but like, I wrote the book because I wanted to help people, and to be on a chat with you guys, hearing you guys all talk about how it's helping you, it's like, man, because you just don't know if your investment of time, effort, energy, passion, money is gonna pay off, and you don't know until you've written the whole damn thing. And so, a couple years later, it's working. So that I'm just really, really happy to hear the ideas resonate.
That's awesome. And kudos to you as well for writing it as well. Just don't end up going to go for a marathon straight after this, because you get so excited. Your wife's going to be after AJ and me. For you guys made him so excited. He went for a marathon after this. He has so much energy. By the way, have you actually finished your marathon, or was it just something that you were training for?
Yeah. I ran the Boston Marathon in 2017.
Wait, not the one where the bombing was, right? Not that one.
The same race, but not that. I wasn't racing that year.
Oh, good. Thank God for that. I was like, that would be a very different. That would be a very different segment at that point.
Yeah, that would be quite the story to drop. Like, oh, and also I was part of
Yeah.
a terrorist.
That would be like, but number one Amazon bestseller and the survivor of the. I mean, nothing against people who survived it, but I imagine it would have been horrific. But I definitely, I'm glad that you were not there, man. So, or at least you were not affected by that at all. So that's pretty good, man. So sounds like I obviously want to focus. It sounds like from a reader's perspective, you've been debunking what penetration testing has traditionally meant and what it's really supposed to be. So keen to know from your side as well, do you already have a pen testing background? That's what got you into it, or was it more client conversations? And I think you mentioned earlier about what motivated you. I think we kind of touched upon pen testing then. So do you kind of like, why that particular area of Hackable, and why not say compliance, something else? What made you kind of stick to that?
Well, a big reason that I focused on that particular area is because it is one of those, 10 or so problems that I hear everybody struggle with, either explicitly, like, I don't know how to do this thing, or implicitly, where they're like just doing the thing and not realizing what they're doing wrong. And I focused on that because there are some pretty significant implications about this particular thing. And at its most surface level, it almost sounds like, does that matter? Right? We're talking about like, well, it's called this, but it should be called, like, does that matter? And when you peel back the layers to that, the answer is that it's not really the term that matters. Although obviously in the book, I lay out like, here's what the term means. Here's how it's being used. Here's what it should mean, but it's really the outcome that matters. And that's the thing that I think I took issue with around this particular problem, is that if you think about the person who buys a penetration test, usually they're trying to achieve a certain goal. Mm-hmm. And a penetration test might achieve that goal, but it also might not. And that's the real challenge that I see, that I think is largely a problem that has been created by a combination of marketing in the sales industry, marketing in the security industry, as well as some element of regulators and not compliance bodies, but regulators who like might not necessarily understand the difference. The government, sometimes they don't know exactly everything that they're talking about.
What?
The government? No,
you had no idea.
But if you
the NSA cuts the feed. That's pretty much.
Yeah. And I just felt like it's a pretty big problem. And think about like anything in your life, right? If you're going out to achieve something and you try to get help to achieve that thing, and someone's like, yeah, here's how I help you do that thing. I'm going to give you this thing. And you're like, great, that's the thing I need. And it turns out the thing they're selling you is something different. And they might not even be malicious in doing that, but you don't know that what you're buying is this different. It's like, man, that's really bad, because you're never going to actually be able to achieve your goal. And obviously I'm a goal-oriented person. I think anyone who invests in anything has a goal for like, why did they invest that money? They want to achieve something. And so that's why I sort of took aim at this particular issue.
And very well said, actually, because most of the conversations about pen testing, the intent, and this is as a non-reader of the book, and I'm not sure if this is kind of how you guys went into some of the conversations that you may have had in the book, where to what AJ and Nick mentioned, tick box exercise, let's get this over with, so that once a year activity, let's kick it off. And maybe that's why I don't want to throw dirt at any of the big fours, but usually what you end up getting is like an IBM auto scan report, whatever that's called. And you look at like, wow, I paid a lot of money for this scan, like an automatic scan. And this is like, I mean, I haven't even read the book. I feel like that's kind of where you would have kind of hit those people as AJ has gone into the skies. So is that also something that played into this as well? Like, did you kind of personally experience that yourself as well? Where you were just like, you kind of signed up for it, and I guess what you got is basically not what you were expecting, but rather just like how do I put this? A lipstick version of something really bad.
Yeah, I experienced it in maybe a slightly different way than the way you presented it. And I experienced it, I guess, like indirectly through our customers and in people who never became customers, just conversations we're having with all kinds of different companies. And I saw this thing keep happening that I'm like, that's really not good for everybody in this situation. Where, you know, there's an organization that says somehow they come to the realization they need penetration testing. Maybe they've been told that, maybe it's been explicitly required, or maybe they just realize, hey, we need some sort of security testing. I've heard that term before. It sounds cool. Let's go do that thing.
Yeah.
But then what winds up happening is, so for example, like we might be having a conversation with a customer or prospective customer, and they're like, yeah, definitely. This is exactly what we want to do. Here's our goal. We want to achieve that in this way. Yes, what you're describing achieves that. And then they're like, well, I've also talked to, a bunch of other companies, and they're like, 6% of your cost. And it's like, not 6% less, like 6% up, like 94% less money. And you're like, those are obviously different things.
Yeah.
But I mean, no two things are ever that disparate in price and are the same thing in any category. But then the way it's described is so unclear. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's like, look, I don't care what you guys call it. I just need my problem solved. Can you help me solve my problem? And that sucks for that person who's in those shoes. And so I wanted to go do what I could do to do one of or both outcomes is what I wanted to achieve. One was, let's get everybody talking about it correctly. I also realized that's probably impractical. Like, am I going to get everybody in all the adjacent communities to like start talking about this the right way? Like, I hope so, but maybe not. But at a minimum, what I can do is I can give a guide. And that's really what this part of the book does. I can give a guide to the person who needs this thing. They're like, look, I just need my thing more secure. Here, I can give you a guide. And it doesn't even matter now what people are calling it anymore. If you can filter out like what is really happening, then everybody's going to win.
Oh, I love it. Just guiding the future as well. So I just noticed Nick was there as well. Hey, Nick, thanks for coming on, man. As in the other Nick who was on the chat. Not this Nick. That's the Nick I was thinking about.
I was like, Nick's been talking to you this whole time. What are you talking about?
No, like,
just noticed I was here. Got it. Okay.
Welcome to the show, Nick. Welcome. Good to have you.
Thanks
here.
for coming in again. Thanks for coming to the show, Nick. I was gonna say, in terms of people, your intended audience, sounds like practitioners like Nick and AJ are also finding benefits. And I can hear myself echo. But the squad. The one thing I wanted to ask was, in terms of your expected reader, like, who you expected when you're writing this book, did you like had an audience in mind? Like, I'm going for people who are kind of like, there you go, AJ. Like, you were going for AJ. Like, I'm gonna
had me in mind when he was writing it. He was just writing it.
That's it. I just want AJ to like the book. That would be Amazon #1 bestseller. So as long as he buys it, Amazon bestseller #1. Well, because it's pretty. I think actually pretty good that you mentioned it, AJ, as well, because it's clearly hit the mark for you. Clearly hit the mark for Nick as well. So is that the intended audience, or was that intended audience to be a bit more broader? Because I think when you mentioned it, being guide for people who are trying to not maybe rephrase, but everyone rephrasing pen testing vulnerability assessment, but identifying what they're really trying to achieve from it. So what was your initial audience in mind when you started writing the book? And did that change as you were going?
Yeah, so maybe there's even two ways I can answer that. So one is who's the audience, and the other is how did I go about communicating to the audience? Because there's some nuances to that second question that I had some really interesting consequences. So the first question is, who did I write it for? So I wrote it like I did actually decide an avatar. I literally, there was a specific person, and that person represented sort of an archetype. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to write for this person solving their problems. And it's someone that I knew who is, the CTO of the type of company who has these types of problems. And I was like, all right, well, that person I know has these issues. Let me write it so it makes sense for that person. So that was the core audience, was what I define as basically technology leaders, the person whose butt is on the line when, the security of a software system is, in scope or whatever. But I also was thinking about security professionals and software developers too. And so I was, even though I had this, avatar that I was writing towards, I was thinking about those other people too, because security is a team sport and it's not something that any one specific person or one type of person can do. So I was like, all right, I need to make sure that all these different people are going to be able to, it will make sense to them. But the decision was that the technology leader was, whenever there was it has to be one or the other. Whenever those moments, when I came to those moments, it was like, you're writing it for the technology leader, the person who's like CTO or equivalent, a larger company. The CTO might not directly be responsible for security. So that's who I wrote it for. So the core audience is people who are involved, either directly responsible for or directly involved with. I wrote it so that whether you're very, very experienced, you've been doing this for decades, or you're brand new to the field or not even in the field yet, I wrote it so that those principles would make sense. And people sometimes wonder, well, how can you do that? How can you write a book that makes sense to someone both experienced and with no experience? And the answer to that is that what I was really trying to do, remember, I was trying to debunk a lot of misconceptions. And who holds misconceptions? The really experienced people. So what I had to do was I had to write it in a way that both addresses the realities that someone who's been doing this a long time might hold near and dear, but also explain them in ways where someone entering the field could be like, well, what are the common conceptions or misconceptions? And the way that I went about doing that, so this is the sort of second way to answer the question, is how did I go about communicating that? I wrote it with a very specific sort of mental mode, in that I imagined myself, and sometimes was actually literally doing this too, talking to my, at the time, 12-year-old nephew. And he's this really curious, smart kid, but doesn't know anything about, or he actually knows about technology probably more than maybe some people in leadership positions, but he's not in the field. He certainly doesn't know corporate jargon. And so that was a really good reference point to whenever I'm describing something, be like, could I describe this to him? If I said this to him, would he know what I'm talking about? And if I didn't, that helped. And if I felt that he wouldn't understand it, that helped me say, all right, I have to define that, or I have to simplify it, or I need to use a metaphor or a story. And because I did those things, because I wrote it in that way, I've had people from people that are my mentors, people that I've been looking up to, have been doing this for a really long time, all the way to people who are freshmen in college, say, I totally got it. That actually resonated. And that to me is one of the things that was, really meaningful, to know that I was able to communicate something that is so complex and, technical and scientific in a way that even a teenager could understand.
That's
awesome. I really enjoyed the tone of the book, and there was a fair amount of humor in there, right? Like the cat, not a cat, I really liked. There were some other segments squirrels are the best hackers. That was a first heard for me. So, I really learned a lot from the book in that regard. But I got that the audience that you were speaking to, right? It definitely came across as you're speaking to decision makers most of the time. But then AJ and I, as practitioners, reading through it, I don't want to speak for you too much, AJ, but I got two things out of it. If I had to categorize them, there was oh, wow, I didn't really know that piece of it, or this explained this thing, right? Because we're sort of in adjacent things. We don't do the things that TED and ISE does, right? We touch other parts of it that sort of overlap in the circle. So we're oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. I'm glad you explained that way. And then the other part was this is what I've been saying, right? you hit those spots where you're like, yes, he's saying exactly what I want to say in this scenario. So, I think that it really appeals to a broad audience. And so I'm glad that AJ, brought that up on LinkedIn and said, hey, definitely check out this book. Because I really think that it does appeal to a lot of folks, and it clears up a lot of things. And cycling back to something that was said, a little while ago was, standardization of terminology. You said that you hoped that this would maybe guide people in the right direction. I would love to hold this book up and say, let's use these terms, everybody, because this seems like the right way to go forward with it. With everybody confusing terms, it makes it difficult. And sort of having one tome that you can hold up and say, hey, let's all decide to just follow this. I mean, the terms ultimately, as you said, don't really matter. It's the outcomes. But if we're just describing them quickly, it can become confusing if we're not using the same terms.
Yep, and I think it's good to hear, Ted, that you were thinking of your 12-year-old nephew in mind, because I was like, this is a great way to talk about generally complex things in a manner that anybody can understand. And that's why I keep telling people, I don't care what level you are, I don't care what role you're in, you can pick up this book and you can get something from it. And I think hearing that you thought about your nephew throughout the process confirms that it's designed yes, it's for folks that are making decisions and that understand what they're, they may have already purchased things and spent thousands of dollars on things, right? And doing really important things. But also if you're just trying to figure out, you're starting out in this field and want to know some stuff about application security and what does it mean when someone says they're going to do a penetration test, because that's the first thing anybody getting into security says they want to do is, I want to be a penetration tester. And they're like, it seems so cool. Then they read this book and be like, hold on, do I want to be a pen tester, or I want to do vulnerability assessments? What do I actually want to do? And I think too, just the things that you bring up are things that how Nick was saying was this is what I've been saying. It's things that it's you should care about in security, security being a team sport, security being able to be used as a differentiator. These are things that if people can grasp these concepts, security will become more important. So it's cool to hear kind of the backstory of some of this stuff too. Just, obviously a big fan of the book, and I truly think it's a must read. So Ashish, you're on the hook. Next time I get on your show, I'm going to ask you the first, I'm going to turn it on you. And the first question I'm going to ask is have you read Hackable yet?
Well, I am going to order it. And I was going to ask Ted, where else can we find it apart from Amazon, so we can make it number one bestseller at other places? By the way, I just want to acknowledge the comment from Shilpa. Totally resonate. Ted as an author, I think she's an author as well. Cheers, Ashish, for an interesting initiative. I think the credit goes to Nick and AJ for starting with this, not more.
Nick, really, the credit's to Nick. He had the idea in the comments, and I just piggybacked it. So
there you go. We made it happen.
And welcome to the show.
We just made it happen. That's it. Sorry, Ted.
And welcome to the show, Nick.
Oh, welcome to the show as well. Yes, that's right.
Nice to meet everybody.
And Zenith was all my favorite security folks in one window. Thanks, Ashish. Nick said as well. But it's awesome. So is there any other place where we can make this number one? So is Amazon number one? So to AJ, your point, next time I definitely would have the book read. But I want to buy it in a place which it hasn't hit number one yet, so I can help kind of push that traffic over there. So where do you recommend we buy it from, Ted?
Well, Amazon's definitely the big boy. It's available in other places too, like Barnes and Nobles and some of the other ones. But what I'd recommend, if people really wanted to help support the ability for the ideas in this book to expand their reach, I mentioned, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not now. Short-term memory just gone. But I'm in the process of recording the hi, I'm Ted. Thanks for having me. I'm recording the audiobook, and that's going to come out it should be the end of May, and that will be everywhere you can get audiobooks, Audible, iTunes, or whatever. So, and I produced that because what's really interesting is a lot of people came back to me saying, look, I want to read this book. This is exactly the type of idea I'm looking for, but I don't read books. I listen to books. And I'm like, well, there's a whole part of the population I'm not serving yet. And so that would probably be the next thing if people really wanted to help support it.
That'll be awesome. Actually, that's perfect to my category, because as being a podcast listener, that would be similar to me reading, listening to a book. I know most of the books that I have quote unquote read are definitely I've listened to them. I've never read them in person. So that'll be that works. I would classify myself as that person as well. So that works really well. So I guess I'll have listened to it before we speak next time about this, AJ. But I'll definitely promote it when it comes out. So I just wanted to quickly do a run around. If you guys had any more questions for Ted before we kind of go and close. I think the audience seems to have enjoyed the conversation as well. So I do appreciate you, Ted, and AJ and Nick coming on. Just making sure I haven't missed anyone's questions, considering this is like straight from the author, straight from the source.
I don't think I have any questions. You know, Ted and I have talked a lot about Hackable and just the concepts there. So, you know, I just, you know, kudos again to you, Ted, for writing something great and writing something that definitely inspired me to rethink how I think about things in this industry. And I think any person in security or just technology in general, you constantly want new information that challenges the way you think and challenges some of the perceptions that you may have. And this book definitely did that for me. So kudos to you. You know, I'm going to continue to tell people about it, buy it for people, and definitely support the audiobook when it comes out as well.
That is awesome. That's awesome. Nick, any final comments on this, man?
Yeah, I think we covered, I marked this up heavily. I think we covered most of the things that I had called out inside of the book that I really enjoyed. The one thing I will say to Ashish is that there is an Easter egg on the physical copy of this book. So you need to buy it and buy the audiobook as well.
Fair enough.
So I'm just going to throw that out there as sort of a teaser.
There you go. Must read from someone, one of the listeners as well. So I think people should buy the physical book for the Easter egg.
Forgot about
audiobook so that we can make Nick reach #1 over there as well, because audiobooks are cheaper anyway. So you should it should just be by default. It should be a bundle, physical copy, audio copy, all for X amount. Just make it happen. So Amazon has put this in the ether already. There you go. But Ted, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm definitely pumped. I get the inspiring piece as you mentioned. Oh, actually, there is a question. Hey, Zenith. Maybe a question for Ted. Can you say something about your experience working with building security champions program, success or failure? Maybe need to go back and read your book. Great book again. Oh, she shared the book as well. There you go, another reader.
There you go.
So, security champions program.
I can speak to that really quickly before we head off and know that we're
perfect.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm happy to bring the dialogue on this specific question offline as well, in DMs or in a group chat, a public post, whatever. But so building champions is, of course, the idea of like, how do we influence others to support the cause? And that was something that I spent a lot of time and effort sort of thinking about in writing the book. Was that, look, those of us that live in the security world every day, you don't even have to ask a security person why security matters. It's just like, it's the right thing to do. It matters. Like, of course it matters. Mm-hmm. But the business people, they don't necessarily inherently believe that. And for any security person paying attention right now, if that's a harsh truth that you've just been exposed to, I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you. But even if it's the right thing to do, the business doesn't necessarily care about security unless we can talk about it in business terms. And that was why I made the sort of the final outcome of this whole process was, how do you turn it into a business advantage, which is support your sales and marketing efforts. Throughout the book, I also identified all the ways to think about it in business terms. Like, here's why it costs you money that you're not expecting. Here's why it's cost you effort that you're not expecting. Here's how to avoid those things. Here to spend money better and stuff like that. And I'm of the opinion that sort of my whole strategy in the way I wrote that, and I think the strategy in how security professionals can talk to the business, is that, first of all, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the business. We have to understand what they care about. And they really only care about two things that leads to one thing. They care about making more money or spending less money, either of which drive to making more profit. So we always have to think about security in those terms. I think that there's two ways you can do that. You can avoid bad things, or you can pursue good things. And you should probably do both. But avoiding bad things, that's sort of historically what the entire field of risk has been about. The entire field of security is like, how do we make sure that this bad thing doesn't happen? Let's spend money in the effort to make this, a security breach should not happen. So that's avoiding bad things. And that's really, really good. But I've also observed that I think if you think about the cognitive bias that a lot of leaders tend to have, they're usually a little bit more confident about themselves and their decision making, and there's a lot of recency bias, which is like whatever's happened most recently carries more weight. And when what's happened most recently is we didn't get hacked, it's like I'm doing the right thing. So it's hard to make the case to like, hey, we should spend more money when I'm making all the right calls, So that's where the avoiding bad things sometimes it sometimes struggles. And that's where you see all these memes, right? Where it's like before a security breach and there's the guy like counting out the pennies. And then it's like after the security breach, he's got like, dollar bills or whatever. That's because of this particular situation. So that's one way to think about it. But I think the more powerful way to think about it is, how do we pursue good things? How can we use security to echo our core values as a company? How can we use it as a marketing tool? How can we equip the sales team with talking points about why our security is what makes our product special in some way? How can we use security as the way to get enterprise adoption? And these are the kinds of things that companies should start thinking about. And I'm fortunate that I've lived, like, my whole worldview is with the progressive companies who do that. That's why those kind of companies hire someone like me, is they want to first secure their solution and then prove it. But they're like the teeny little minority in the population of all companies. And so eventually everyone else, once they figure out like, wait a minute, the buyer wants security. Most people have a hard time proving it or doing it. Opportunity, right? And that's where I think security has a really great opportunity. So long story short, to answer your question, you build champions by speaking in business terms, quantify where you can, but definitely tell stories. That's why my book is filled with stories, because humans are wired to listen to and react to stories.
That's awesome. Hopefully that answered your question, Zira, but I'll definitely encourage you to reach out to Ted as well. That's a great question as well. It's such a deep question as well, depending on the organization you speak to and the minority thing that you mentioned as well. That is so true as well. You, like, all four of us are very progressive thinking security people over here, talking about automation, making compliance suck less. Why should penetration testing be called vulnerability assessment? In most cases, I love it, but I wonder if all of us are a majority or minority. But sounds like we are in minority. But I hope we can make the other folks come over here. So with that said, I think this is towards the end of it. So any final thoughts? I think we've gone through AJ and Nick already. Chad, for people who are not convinced yet, what can they expect? So I'm already convinced. I'm buying the book and the audio version when it comes out. So, and I'm going to send you a picture of it as well once I do it. I'll probably do a post of it. I think it'll be pretty good. For any messages for people who are probably not yet convinced or coming into this later for buying the book, why should they buy it?
Well, if you're not convinced about the ideas, then I would encourage people to reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Maybe we come back on your show, Ashish. We get somebody who doesn't agree with me and let's just brawl it out. Let's
I love the idea. I love the idea. Actually, that would be really interesting, because I would love to hear from the majority about why this minority of forward-thinking progressive security people should continue to exist and thrive, and why should the other half continue to exist? How are they expecting to grow and change and everything? So I love the idea.
Just find an auditor. Just any auditor, they'll disagree.
Well, you need to find an auditor, make him read the book, and then come back and say he doesn't agree, or he or she doesn't agree.
Yeah.
All right. So that's an easy task, AJ. So I'll leave that with you. And since you hang out in that group already, but I just wanted to say thank you, Chet. This was really awesome for me, and thank you for. I see the audience appreciate that as well, that you came over. They love the book as well. I mean, AJ and Nick are already fans. Now seems like you've got a new fan in me as well. So I'm definitely downloading the audiobook when it gets available, as well as buying the book. So this is awesome. Where can people find you if they have follow-up questions, even maybe questions about how to become an author?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to mentor anybody who's interested in writing a book, because it is such a hard thing to do. So the best place to reach me is just go over to tedharrington.com. And if you're looking for where to follow me on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, or you want to know more about the book, or you need help with your security testing and you want to talk to me about, how we might partner together, all that information is there. Just go to tedharrington.com and we'll chat.
Awesome. That was my dog saying hello as well, by the way. I don't know if you got that, but AJ and Nick, I know people know you guys already, but where can they find you and the company that you work for?
Yeah, bytecheck.com and AJ Yan on all your platforms. Well, not all of them, LinkedIn and Twitter, really.
Dude, Clubhouse.
I am on Clubhouse. I did something on Clubhouse a few weeks ago.
Ted's on Clubhouse as well, by the way. So people who hey Nick, where can people find you as well, man?
EITR.tech, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You'll probably find me like hiding in the comment sections of AJ's or Ashish's posts. So definitely get me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, boys. I'm looking forward to bringing more guests in. So Zenith and others who've kind of were looking at this, if they have more recommendations, and I would love to bring more authors. And I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for this. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation as well. Maybe version 2 of the book.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for tuning in as well. I will see you on the next book club or this weekend at the Cloud Security Podcast regular shows. See ya.